Hi, welcome to Women Created and Called Live. Today, we are going to be talking about commitment. I am Beth McGrain-Tran, your host for this show, and I want to do a quick little review of where we have been in these past episodes. This is part 5, the very last episode in a series all about practicing the 4 keys to connection. And so, like I said, this episode today is about commitment. It's the 4th of the keys, and it is, as all of the others are too, it is so important. This is the one that was added on to this concept of the keys to connection. It was added on later because I realized that we had these other 3 keys: availability, presence, and communication. And then I realized if we are not committed to sticking with it to create connection in our relationships, it's just might not happen because it takes practice. And anything that takes practice means you get to keep doing it over and over and over. And that takes commitment. So that's where we are. That's where we're going today. And so let's start out by talking about just a simple, answer the question, what exactly is commitment? What are we talking about when we talk about commitment? So there are 3 different definitions that I found. And the first one was the state or quality of being dedicated to a cause or an activity. The next one was a pledge or an undertaking. That's really a big one for the context where we're using this word commitment. And this one was super interesting to me, this 3rd definition: an engagement or obligation that restricts freedom of action. This one is super interesting to me because I read that and I thought, it restricts freedom of action. Yes, and also no. So I am going to explain what I mean by that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about why it matters. Why does it matter at all if we stay committed to what we say, if we follow through with what we say we're going to do? Well, the biggest reason that I could think of is trust. 2, really. Trust and identity. Okay, so first let's talk about trust. Think about this. What happens in your relationships when you don't follow through with something? When you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it. I can tell you from my own experience and also seeing the experience of people around me and people I have coached that it breaks that trust. Whoever you made that promise to no longer believes you, especially if this happens over and over and over again. They begin to develop a sense that they can't trust you. So that happens in relationships, and it also happens with yourself. How much do you trust yourself if you know that when you say you're going to do something, you don't end up doing it? So here's what happens, especially, let's talk a little more about that relationship with yourself, whether you're trusting yourself or not. What happens in your brain when you don't follow through? What happens is that our brains are always looking for evidence for the thoughts that we have. Our brains want to confirm that thought is true or not true. And it goes to work looking at our past experiences, especially for evidence about whether this thought that we're having is true or not. So if your brain looks at past experiences and finds all of this evidence, it collects evidence that, oh, there was this time when you said you were going to do that and then you didn't. Oh, and there was this other time when you made that promise to your child and then didn't do it. And then there was this other time when you told your husband you were going to do something and you didn't do it. And then there was this goal you had promised yourself you were going to lose weight by a certain date and that didn't happen. So then your brain has collected all of this evidence. Oh, nope, you're not a person who follows through with what you say you're going to do. So when that happens, then your brain has that thought, right? You are not a person who follows through. And if this is a thought that you have had about yourself for a long time, that means that your brain has practiced that thought over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, probably thousands of times over years. And because of that, that thought now has become a belief, and not just a flimsy little belief, but a pretty deep belief that you have about yourself. Now, if you have seen some of the other episodes of this show, one of the very first ones was called The Masks We Wear. And these deep beliefs that we have developed about ourselves, I like to call those masks. And it's a mask that we have picked up and we have worn around for so long that we can't necessarily tell where the mask begins and the real you, where the mask ends and the real you begins, because you've been wearing that mask for so long. But that is what's happening there. You have created a mask that statement is true about you, that you are a person who does not follow through. Now, I ask you, is that the woman that God created you to be? When I look at myself and I look at, the patterns in my behavior, and I look at the beliefs that I have developed about myself and the masks that I wear, I can see certain ones, and this is one of them, that I know that's not the woman that God created me to be. And so, because I realize that, now I can go to work on doing something about it. I can begin to create evidence for a different thought. A thought like, I am a woman who follows through. And then it takes practicing that thought over and over again and having my actions come from that thought. And that is what will create a new result for me. That's how I become that woman. Now, that being said, this is not something that we can do on our own. This is something that happens because of God's grace working in us. So it is key. It is so imperative that I lean on God's grace and cooperating with that grace in order to create those changes in my life. So let's keep going here. So these masks that we wear, I want you to see and think about, okay, first, what are the masks that you're wearing? And then because of those masks, how does that affect the way that I show up in my life, in every area of my life? If I'm not being the person that God's created me to be, and I am maybe more concerned about what people will think of me, of the way that people see me, of making sure that I am pleasing the people around me. I'm doing things motivated by, like I said, by pleasing others. And that is what motivates me. All of these things can be a mask. So I just challenge you to think about that and see if there are places in your life where you see that happening. So here is another question for us. Why is commitment so hard? I don't know about you, but there are so many things that, like I said, it is hard to stay committed to things sometimes. And commitment just comes and goes. And you know what? That's true for everybody. And that is the way that it goes. And there's something we can do to get through those times. So let me back up just a little bit here. So why is commitment so hard? Your brain is simply trying to keep you safe from discomfort, and our actual, the neurological pathways in our brains, they want to take the path of least resistance. So when you have thought a thought over and over again, it creates a pathway. And the more you practice that thought, that's a path of least resistance. And so your brain will quickly go to that thought frequently. And that is the way that we're designed. So because we have, because our brain wants to keep us safe, doesn't want to lead us into something that could be harmful or uncomfortable or is very high risk or anything like that, then that's what we naturally do, naturally lean into, until we see that that's happening and we apply our reason to it. And we think with a different part of our brain. Instead of the automatic part, we're using our prefrontal cortex, which is where our reason is. So when we apply our reason, and reason is a gift from God, as all of it is, right? Our brains are designed so amazingly. God designed us so beautifully that we have this ability to reason that the animals don't have. They just have the instinct part. And we have this beautiful gift of reason. So, thank God that we can do that. But like I said, we have also collected all of this evidence, and we have these long practiced thoughts and beliefs, and that makes it very hard to keep our commitments. And the last piece here that I thought of to share with you is that willpower is never enough. Commitment always ebbs and flows. Willpower comes and goes. So, support and accountability are crucial to getting you through those times when staying committed is a struggle. It is so important to have support and accountability. So, that's why it's so hard. Okay, so how do we do it then? How can we stay committed to what we say we're going to do and get through those times when we just have no willpower? No willpower. I say start with prayer and discernment. this is the place to begin. Whether you are about to commit to something new, or you have already committed to something and you're noticing that you're struggling to stay committed. In either case, bring it back to prayer and discern, okay, with what I know right now, where is the Holy Spirit guiding me? What actions am I being guided to right now? And then discern, think about what your options are. And also consider each of the options and notice interiorly what comes up as you think about that option being a reality. And that is really helpful in discernment, because you can ask for the Holy Spirit's guidance, and the Holy Spirit will help you feel consolation or desolation in each of those options. So there is a whole lot more to that. That's just a tiny little sliver of what you would be doing if you were doing Ignatian discernment. And so we could talk about that more later. That would be a great topic for another podcast episode. So we will definitely do that. So that's the place to start. Start with prayer and discernment, and then make a choice. You have to make a choice. And then you're going to act on it. But before you even get to the action part, I want you to think about why it is important. So I think there might be a book out called Start With Why. So we didn't actually start with why. We start with prayer and discernment. But why comes next. It's really high up there, and it will help you either commit or recommit to what you have in mind. So start with why. And you may have heard me mention on a previous episode, a very useful tool that I love to use is called 7 Layers Deep. And I heard this from Dean Graziosi. And you simply state what you want, what your intention is. And then you ask yourself, why is that important? And you do this 7 times to go deeper and deeper into why that is important to you. And it doesn't have to be 7, but at least go past 5. And if you're able to go past 7, good for you. It gets a little harder toward the end, but it's so worth it. And like I said, such a useful tool. I have used it many times, and it really does help me when I feel stuck and like I can't move forward toward a goal that I have, it really does help me get moving again. So that's a very useful tool. Now, you may have heard the phrase, God doesn't ask us to be successful, only to be faithful. And I am paraphrasing here. I may have those words mixed up, but the concept is there. And I apologize. I don't know who said this. I don't know where the direct quote comes from. But the concept, he asks us to be faithful, not successful. Success is great, but what this idea says to me is that my actions along the way and the way that I keep going and I stay committed that's my job. That's my part, staying faithful to it. The success part or the result is not up to me. It's up to God. But He asks us to be faithful. Faithful to Him, faithful to trusting Him, faithful that He's going to take care of the rest. We just got to do our part and let God do His part. And this brings me to a concept that I learned in a secular setting, and that is that your intention plus your mechanism or the way you go about it equals your result. And it was fascinating because we got into this discussion about how much of that result is dependent on your intention. And they said 100% it's all about your intention. This was a little confusing to me at first because it's like, okay, well, I understand that my intention needs to be very strong, and I need to be clear about what the result that I want and what I intend to do. But the mechanism or the actions, the way I go about it, there still has to be something there, right? And so the way that I realized that this works is that the mechanism part is a variable. There are about 1 million ways to go about doing something. And so that's why your intention is the most important part, because then the way that you go about it does not matter as long as it is a moral way of going about it. We can never use an immoral means to reach a good result. That makes it so that the result itself is no longer good. So keep that in mind. But as long as we're not talking about in that way, there's about 1 million different ways to go about doing something. And I was thinking about this morning, actually, as I first woke up, because recently I heard a coach talk about, she was talking about commitment, and she was talking about the way that, how when you say you're going to do something or you have made a commitment to create something by a certain date, you have this goal that you have very clearly set, and then you're going along and you see for some reason maybe it looks like you might not reach the goal. Maybe an obstacle has come up. Maybe some circumstance has come up and you think, oh, no, I can't do it. That comes from all or nothing, black or white thinking. And that's what we want to avoid when we're trying to make sure that we stay committed and follow through with what we say we're going to do. And so she was talking about it in terms of you gotta kind of flirt with your commitment. Flirt with your goal. It's like you're in a relationship with it. Well, I was thinking about this and I thought of a different kind of analogy. And that is a dance. And I thought, okay, if I were a person who I am in this crowded place and I'm looking at a dance floor, and it's a crowded dance floor. There's all kinds of, people dancing all over the place. And I see on the other side of the dance floor It could be, something desirable. It could be a person that I love, and I can't wait to get to them. I am committed to getting across this busy dance floor and getting to them and giving them a great big hug. Or, it can be in terms of a goal that you have. Maybe it is your child who you love so much and you can't wait to get across the dance floor and just give them the biggest bear hug ever. Maybe it's your best friend that you haven't seen in a long time and you can't wait to go and hug your friend. So you've got this busy dance floor. Now, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get from point A to point B with all of these people coming and going and moving all around on this dance floor? Well, you got to start. First of all, you have to start. And you will become more clear about how to get there with the more steps that you take. Now, you're going to start, and then somebody's going to come along and get in your way. What are you going to do? Are you going to stop? No, you can't wait to get to that person on the other side. You're not going to stop. You might gently move around them. The point is, it's not going to be a straight path. You are going to find other ways to curve and move around the obstacles between where you are and where you want to be. And it's the same way with staying committed to something that you say you're going to do, to following through. It's the same way. So think of it like a dance. I don't know if you know the 4 temperaments, but I am a sanguine, and that means that I love to make things fun. So when I think of working toward my goals, no matter what they are, as a dance, do you see how it just, well, if you're watching this video and not listening, you can maybe hear it in my voice, even if you are just listening. I am just lit up at the thought of that path toward my goal being a dance. I love it. And think of it like this. The people who are, coming along on the dance floor, you're not going to be mad at them. These are like circumstances in our life. Circumstances are going to come up. Circumstances are neutral. They are not good or bad. You're not going to get mad at somebody who gets in your way as you're trying to go straight across the dance floor. So maybe they bump into you. So what? You are so committed to getting to that person on the other side of the dance floor that you don't care that they bumped into you a little bit. So what? Move around them and keep going. Okay, so it doesn't matter so much how you get there, as long as you have set your intention and you let the result be up to God. You stay faithful to the journey, faithful to having a path. It doesn't have to be a specific path. Maybe you start out on one path and then it changes. That's okay. But you are faithful to walking across the dance floor or dancing. Really, you don't want to walk, you want to dance because it's more fun. And then the last piece I would give you to how we can stay committed is this. Even when you don't get the result that you intended, how do you stay committed then? And here it is. Commit to an infinite timeline. And what that means is that You are so committed to your intention to, let's put it in the context of this series. We're talking about the 4 keys to connection. You are so committed to creating connection in your relationships that you will be committed to it no matter how long it takes. You have the thought in your head, I will until. And at the end of that statement, that's a ... I will until I get there. I will keep going no matter what. And if you're not able to say that, go back to that why. Go back to the why. Remind yourself why it was so important to you in the first place. Why does it matter? Now, remember how that last definition of commitment said it restricts freedom of action. It's an engagement or obligation that restricts freedom of action. And I said, well, yes and no. Maybe you already know what I'm going to say here because I've sort of touched on it, but here's the thing. It does. Here's the yes part. It does mean that you are going to have to say no to some things in order to say yes to a greater thing. So for example, if we go back to that dance floor, there might be somebody who sees you coming out onto the dance floor and they come up to you and they want to dance with you. But you see that person on the other side of the dance floor that you can't wait to get to. You are so excited to get to them that even though it might be really fun to dance with this other person, you know that what you really want, what is better, is to reach that person that you love on the other side of the dance floor. So you're saying no to one so that you can say yes to something better. So that's the yes part. It does restricts freedom of action a little bit. On the other hand, like I was saying, the way that you go about it doesn't matter so much. And so that means not being restricted, but restricted in the sense that, there's only one way to get across that dance floor. And instead being flexible about the how along the way in order to keep that commitment. That's the dance part, right? We're not going to just walk a straight line from A to B. We're going to dance, which means we're going all over the dance floor just to get to the other side. Okay, so what does it look like? If you are committed to creating connection in your relationships, if you go back to the part 1 of this series, we talked about the connected life wheel, and we talked about different categories that you can focus on to create connection in different areas of your life. So what does it look like to create connection and stay committed to creating connection in those different areas? It looks like committing to having a good mindset about it. Remember how the thoughts that we have thought for a long time really affect how much we trust ourselves and our identity that we have about ourselves, and also the identity, the thoughts that other people have about us. And so there are some things that we can do to be aware of that, and also to shift our mindset, shift our thoughts so that we can move forward and stay committed. And again, we are taking committed action, and we're staying faithful to action, but not rigid about how we're going about it. And also, we are not, we are not attached to the result, because the success part, the result part, is up to God. We are the ones staying faithful to the committed action and leave the success part up to God. So here is, and along those lines, it's about committing to the act of loving. Whenever we are creating connection is like one of those first steps that makes it possible to show and receive love in a relationship. And so if we are committed to creating connection, then we are going to commit to the act of loving, and then again, let God take care of the rest. We're committed to the action and letting God take care of the rest. So a couple of reflection questions for you. Think about where in your life is your commitment waning? Is there some goal that you had committed to, and then you see that maybe I'm not going to reach it, maybe I don't really care if I reach it, and you're just seeing that your commitment is not as strong as it was maybe at the beginning. So think about if there's an area of your life where that applies. And it could be in your relationships. How committed are you to the relationships in your life? Are you committed to creating connection with God, with your spouse, with your kids, with your family and friends, with your coworkers, with other people that you volunteer with people in your community? And then again, and with your goals. And then another reflection question for you: what step will you take today to either begin a commitment or to recommit in that area? And then finally, who do you get to be as you take that step? Think about who you are being. I love this question. Today, as you take that step, are you being the woman who you have become with all the masks? Or are you being the woman that you are becoming? The woman that God is creating you to be. The masterpiece He is working on. You are a masterpiece in progress, and so am I. We're not finished yet, but God's been working on us all along, and He wants you to cooperate. He wants you to help. And it takes grace. It takes cooperating with grace in order to do that. So, it's so important to remember that when something matters to you, it is so important. Don't try to do it alone. Get support, get coached, and when you reach that goal and all of your work pays off and you finally have the relationships that you were hoping for, that you always wanted with God. Like I said before, with God, with your spouse, with your kids, with your family and friends, and with your goals, you will be so glad that you didn't try to go it alone. Because God designed us to accomplish great things through the support of others in community. We are not meant to be alone. It says that in the book of Genesis. It is not good for man to be alone. So he set it up so that we could support each other. So I want to give you the support that you need. So let's talk about what that looks like for you in your life. You can reach me by leaving a comment with this video or this episode. You can also find me on social media. Find me at Women Created and Called, both on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also email me at beth@womencreatedandcalled.com. And I would love to hear from you. I would just love to hear if something about this series, about practicing these 4 keys to connection, I would love to know if something resonated for you. And even better, if you've been able to take any little nuggets from this series and apply it to your life, oh boy, please share it with me. I would love to hear how that went for you. And the other thing is that we are now complete with this series. And I have some great ideas for episodes coming up, but I want to hear from you. What would you love to know more about? We can talk more about how do we know the way that God created us? How do we go about really understanding ourselves? How do if you're asking the question and saying, I don't know who I am anymore, how do we go about changing that? So these are all things that we can talk about. We could talk about discernment, like I mentioned earlier. We can talk more about grace and how do we go about cooperating with God's grace? How do we know it's there? What are the things that can block it from getting to us? Or at least slow it down? So there's so much that we could talk about, and I'm so excited to share more with you next week. Please do reach out and let me know how I can support you best. And I look forward to hearing from you. And until next week, God bless you and all those that you love. Bye.